It suffices to say that what lies beneath was a low point in GW2's development. So low in fact it made for a tripping hazard in Giala Delve itself, and that was in part due to it releasing with the worst Fractal in the game at the moment of its release, possibly ever. That however begs the question to why is it the worst? Why is it regarded lower than IBS encounters that resemble target dummy golem more than actual encounter? And why I'm even giving a crap if ArenaNet isn't going to fix anything? While we can answer the last one out of the bat, I have brain damage. Other than that, the construction of failure is somewhat a specialty of mine, cue 100 videos about Warrior. On top of which, if we properly define and understand the bullshit we already tripped over, we will help ourselves avoid stepping in it in the future. Therefore, this and any other conversation bearing game design will always hold purpose outside of entertainment value. And even if it didn't, shit-talking Kanaki for 15 minutes would be a justifiable waste of time no matter what. If you also want to shit-talk Kanaki, consider checking out Bullshit Brigade's Discord server, and if you like the content, you can support me through Patreon. But on to the proper video. As much as it is on brand for a demon to make everyone in the vicinity extremely unhappy, it's not entirely the purpose of its existence as a set piece in the game world. So let's first analyze his encounter mechanics. Kanaki opens the encounter with Dread Visage, meaning you have to turn away from him or be feared at the end of the channel. Immediately after that, he's throwing around AoE spinning axes, which can be dragged away from the fight by whoever's targeted, and his adds shoot away additional AoEs. Every 10% health he loses, he starts channeling and gets a Defiance bar. Breaking it means next bar will be a little harder to break, failing to do so in time will result in Kanaki summoning another add. Last two mechanics are his numbers thingy, which makes people spread not to clip entire team with these AoEs, and room-wide beach slap AoE explosion, where some people in the team have to jump on small islands surrounding the main arena and kill adds which empower the blast. This doesn't seem like much at the first glance, and all of those are rather simple mechanics. Don't stand in the orange circle and break the break bar should not be mechanics that anyone's brained hamster needs introduction to, let alone an actual human player. But as per usual, the demon lies in the details. Firstly, the Dread Visage mechanic isn't properly introduced to the players should they have to deal with it for the first time, which is a possibility considering Silent Surf appears in Tier 1 Fractals. This mechanic is shown only once before in the Fractal, Yustoi, an NPC of the Ledge, which would be a good demonstration of what the mechanic is supposed to do if we were allowed to bloody look in its direction. The demonstration we get can be easily interpreted as just an AoE fear, prompting players to hug the edge instead of looking away from the caster, and subsequently embark on a magical journey exploring the pit surrounding the arena. Furthermore, this mechanic scales with number of adds summoned, making it more likely players who are still trying to figure out how it works to get 3 ways shagged from the get-go, as there's 3 enemies you have to look away from at the very start of the encounter, and this number will only grow. Further than this, every Defiance bar check unfulfilled will worsen the situation, making losing a player more punishing in this encounter than it is supposed to, as every player lost will make spawning extra adds more likely, and subsequently losing additional players more likely. Every add fires AoEs, making the fight more of a clusterfuck of AoEs as the more adds spawn, which combined with how Kanaki naturally ramps up over the duration of the encounter, makes it so players who are struggling from the beginning are more punished than experienced ones. Furthermore, there's an issue with its numbers mechanic. Firstly, it not just does significant damage to primary target, but also additional damage to every secondary target, making it a prime tool for accidental or purposeful trolling, as whoever on the team happens to be brain deficient ends up making attached to him AoE greater danger to everyone else around him than it is to himself. Furthermore, look at its damage. This is just over 10k against a heavy class. Against light class, according to my flawless math, the same thing would hit for over 11.6k damage. More if you're not wearing full ascended gear. Which is an important threshold I call fuck elementalist, meaning that Ellie can get one shot from full health by this attack. And before we reintroduce the snarky remarks about Ellie in their natural habitat or anything in this space, let us proceed with the fact that some classes are simply not allowed to run full berserker due to mechanics like this one. Why?
'Cause fuck 'em, that's why.
Furthermore, many public groups won't be running a dedicated healer in their group, and average player won't be keeping his health bar topped up at all times, making it even more likely they'll fall to this mechanic. The pattern of this mechanic punishes inexperienced players harder keeps repeating across the encounter's general design. If you aren't breaking boss's defiance bar, consistently encounter becomes more overwhelming and chaotic. If you aren't keeping your health bar topped up, you are likely to get shreked by split mechanic. And if you don't have prior knowledge of how certain mechanics work, you'll be punished for your lack of knowledge, right off the gate. Not to mention, losing one player makes entire thing more likely to get overwhelming, unless they play Weaver and have no CC in their kit. In short, this entire encounter is designed to punish players who are already struggling, and let those experienced in the game clear it with no issue, making the experience boring for top tier players and insufferably frustrating for everyone below average or just learning the encounter. And that's before we introduce fractal instabilities to the mix. You can probably guess how certain instabilities, like Hamstrung, Virality, Boon Overload, or Stick Together, can cause already punishing mechanics to completely fornicate over an entire group of people. Kanaki was not designed with fractal instabilities in mind, and Silent Surf as a whole wasn't made to resemble most fractals. In Deep Stone, you first make your way through simple puzzles for 5-year-olds, beat up generic fodder mini-bosses, then receive the mechanic of the fractal, the Light of Deldrimor. Immediately, you are forced to use it to kill some mobs that only take damage if affected by it. Then are introduced to how said light fixes floor tiles with a simple puzzle, and then you be asked to use this mechanic for that specific purpose in otherwise simple boss encounter. In Sunqua Peak, every mechanic you'll have to deal with in final encounter, with the exception of orange AoEs, gets its own mini encounter to properly introduce itself, so you know what to do once you reach the final boss. In Twilight Oasis, Palawa Joke grants us uber kneecaps to jump like your grandma wishes she could, and asks us to do some parkour over the city rooftops to kill some dudes keeping up a barrier around the boss arena. Then in the final encounter, we are prompted to use the gift from Daddy Joko to jump over boss's shockwave attacks, navigate the bullshit on the floor, and most importantly, get to the high grounds with NPCs we have to kill to progress the encounter. In short, every mechanic other than don't stand in the yuck we are supposed to utilize throughout the final boss fight is a crucial part of whatever fractal we're currently playing through, and bosses in general are more laid back and chill, partially due to the fact they're all a few years old content, and secondarily to not bend your kneecaps backwards in combination with fractal instabilities. Meanwhile, Silent Self makes you go through a mandatory jumping puzzle that has almost nothing to do with the final boss fight, and a meaningless mob encounters only to show you two mechanics, both in an encounter that can be brute forced and won't let you familiarize yourself with the mechanics even slightly. Not to mention, we're using the grappling thingy with a light flare, a parachute and rest of the whole ordeal only to shove and forget about it as soon as the boss spawns. The grapple gun we are given is the main tool players will instinctively understand to be a main gimmick of the Fractal, like Joko jumps from Twilight Oasis and floor fix flashlight from Deepstone are, and those players will instinctively understand they have to familiarize themselves with this tool for the purpose of clearing the final encounter, on basis of previous experiences with basically every fractal that introduced a gimmick mechanic to this point. Meanwhile, parachute is not used for anything in the Kanaki fight, Neither are flares or whatever else remaining buttons are. Only thing we actually use is the grapple itself, which is only necessary to reach platforms surrounding the arena, which by itself is a fucky experience due to aforementioned platforms being patched higher than main arena, making grapple attempts frustratingly unforgiving. In total, Silent Surf introduces a gimmick and doesn't allow player to make use of it in final encounter. Boss mechanics require specific counterplay, which isn't properly introduced to the player, nor can be done with the gimmick of the Fractal, banking on players' prior knowledge someone new isn't guaranteed to have. Mechanics of the boss fight make the fight a snooze fest to all the people experienced enough to deal with simple mechanics without need to engage the conscious thought, while also punishing every mistake exponentially, making this Fractal extremely unfriendly to pugs and beginner groups, which in total leads to a fun experience for both the below average and top of the bracket players. Silent Surf feels like it was originally designed to be a strike mission, because as to my knowledge, it absolutely was. Unfortunately, what a perfect strike mission encounter is, a dance with a powerful enemy which rewards player for clean execution of the mechanics, is a completely different beast than perfect Fractal encounter, which delivers on a fantasy and gimmick of the Fractal in question, while not standing in players' way to their simple slovenly fun of beating on a boss-shaped piñata. Strikes and raids are more about mechanical execution and player skill, while Fractals are more about the show, adventure, simple fun and goofy gimmicks. Attempting to marry these two concepts is what led Silent Surf to disappoint the highest possible amount of people, as it didn't deliver on its own premise by keeping the final encounter from embracing the fun aspect of its gimmicks, remaining until today this strike mission wannabe no one wished for. Thankfully, ArenaNet learned from this mistake and didn't fuck up the next Fractal we got. Right? Right? As per usual, a big sign of gratitude towards my generous Patreon supporters who continuously consider my dubious quality content worth their money. You're all truly welcome. Crabface out.